Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online, and this is the first EVE Talk from the fully renovated GDA 4.4 hangar. It does look pretty amazing. Of course we are here for other stuff, but I thought we'd take a quick look around here again. Super cool, very big upgrade. Might be a little bit more demanding for some of the older rigs out there, but for me it does seem to be working quite well. There's also some changes to the window or opacity or something like that, I think, so I had to tweak stuff a little bit, and other than that, well, we now know the next quadrant for EVE Online, which is called Foundation, with, well, of course, a big focus on the anniversary for the game, and then celebrating the 4 empires. And another thing that we learned in the last week is that all the attacks that were done on planets were actually infiltrations from the equilibrium of man that then decided, well, to go and cause as much destruction and mayhem as they could. And they're sort of like a death cult, you could say. That aims at ending human life in New Eden, which they believe will bring forth paradise. So yeah, some religious nutters are basically at the forefront of this, and this is also what has led to the current event, where you have to go into these sites from the equilibrium of man. I haven't done any of these just yet, but that's the current state of affairs, you could say, in EVE Online. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store that has a special sale going on, where some skins are for sale for 18 plex rather than, for instance, here 110 for the Rodiva Metamataria Exotica skin. So that is pretty damn cheap. Then let's see, a couple more, still the new ones here for Vampires Hex and Ghost Hex skins, which I think do look pretty cool. And it looks like it's like a single skin every day or something like that that's happening. Now, I haven't kept a close eye on it, honestly. I'd rather have my plex than skins for the most part, but you know, 18 plex for a single skin is definitely a pretty cheap price as well. Quick look at what's happening here in the services. 500 plex for a month Omega, 12 months Omega goes for 5,500 plex, so you're saving 1 month basically. And other than that, we're not seeing anything too special. All right, let's move on to the market then. That's what we're here for. So I did set the opacity of the window to like 0, and then I had to get rid of the blur as well. Still showed stuff through there, but I think this is how you guys prefer it. Let me know in the comments if you would like to actually see the glorious new hangar in the background of the window. But for the sake of clarity, we are going to run like this. And as always, we're gonna start with plex and stuff, coming in at 310. Like that, and let's get started with the plex chart that basically has bounced up from 2.3 million on average, and is not really willing to break through that barrier, going back to that 2 million 1 year low point. And well, we're probably seeing a little bit of upward pressure in the last couple of days as well. Current prices in GTA itself, as seen on the ticker, just below 2.5 million, buyers coming in at 2.3 million, so they must be getting the lion's share of activity at the moment, but that margin in GTA at least is starting to open up. What does this mean for the buyers in the Tranquility Trading Tower and the player-owned trade hubs? Just above 2.4 million, so that's definitely quite a bit of heavy competition driving the price back down for those sellers. But the question is, how long can they keep up, of course, because GTA 4.4 does have the advantage of being able to trade plex through the app as well. And then for the buyers, any more pressure on that? No, that's in the same region, just above 2.3 million, and it looks like for now buyers are winning out, but sellers are clearly hesitating to push the price a lot below 2.4 million for those sellers, and they don't want to crash the price back to another 1 year low point. At least that's my read of this situation. The multiple pilot train certificate has that same little bounce back to the 1.2 billion price mark, just below that for the sellers, and a bit above 1.1 billion for the buyers. Like a margin closing up here as well. Basically, the market is deciding that we're not really gonna crash the price yet again, but are we going to do a moonshot right now? That's not happening just yet either. The skill extractor next, actually flattening out, not really showing that wavy motion that much here, but clearly again stabilizing above the 1 year low points, but not showing that many signs of increasing in price just yet. Just below 270 million for the sellers, and the buyers are coming in at 254 million. Is a lot of trade here being dominated again by the player-owned trade hubs because of the cheaper taxes there, of course. For the injectors, we've got the large-scale injectors first that are also, have done a little bit of a wave and are basically stabilizing above the 1 year low point, which went to less than 600 million ISK. We're currently selling at 606, buyers at 587, and here we do have a different picture if we look at the average prices. This means that for the large scale injectors at the moment, no one is willing to just sell them to these buyers. If you want one, you'll have to pay up above 600 million ISK in all likeliness, or very close to that. You'll have to be pretty aggressive, because to get the average price that we're seeing on the chart, well, it has to be massively dominated by transactions happening on the sell orders rather than the buy orders. The small scale injectors then are doing something, well, not again, doing something slightly different, which is weird. It keeps moving in a different trajectory, or at least has a different vibe to it than the large scale injectors. This one basically has a slow but constant pressure on it, breaking through the 130 million barrier on the average, and a very narrow margin. Look at that, 123 million for the sellers, 117 million for the buyers, and probably a bit more of a nuanced story between sellers and buyers here, and basically a constant slow pressure, slow cooking, you could say, on the 5-day moving average, which would not be good news for investors, of course. We're still a ways away from the 1 year low point, but that pressure is clearly still very much there for the injectors. It's a different aspect. You can't just say, all right, plex has gone up and then stabilized, so we should see the exact same thing in the large scale injectors. No, there's definitely a lot more at play there when it comes to skill points, how generous CCP is, if they come out with new stuff, new skill books to train and things like that. It is definitely a unique market, which is then also completely different from the daily alpha injector market that is knowing another correction after basically reaching 45 million for the second time, which at first here from October to, you could say, February, it managed to maintain that price range quite nicely for 1, 2, 3, 4 months. Now here we try to get back there. We almost made it for a whole month, but then we are going back down in the last 10 days or so. It's back down to 40 million for the sellers and 35 million for the buyers. So a bit of pressure on the daily alpha injector, still 40 million for the sellers and 35 for the buyers. Just in my read on this chart, puts it back in an average price, which again, I would say for an alpha clone player, a free-to-play player, this is a goal that is overseeable, something that you can set yourself, and as a result, I do think this makes these daily alpha injectors very popular, quite unique, and very separate in dynamics from the large-scale injectors and the small-scale injectors. So definitely a unique little market here, filled with opportunity, where we saw lots of pressure, for instance, in the large-scale injectors over the last year. Daily alpha injectors actually managed to maintain average and above average prices for most of the year. Finally, we've got the hypercores that are also seeing signs of pressure again, not at the bottom price just yet. We went well below 250,000 ISK, bit of recovery here up to 260, but right now we're back at 253 for the sellers, 238 for the buyers, bit of margin opening up here, and the pressure is back on for a lot of these plex related items, you could say. This is pretty interesting. I'm just reading this as a little bit more hesitation, which I think is quite normal. We are in quite turbulent times, you could say, with all of the industry changes that now have to be absorbed. We know that there's more on the horizon as well, and so I think that everyone is slowly trying and carefully trying to take their positions, but there's people that are not that confident that will go up in price that soon, and there's probably better opportunities out there if you're looking for a quick buck, a quick turnover, than something like Plex, for instance, at the moment. So we're in a difficult spot. I would say that from the chart perspective, it looks like it's still a good time to buy, but I can definitely understand people that are hesitant or that would rather invest their ISK in other stuff. Next up, the mineral market coming in at 10 minutes. Like that, and here we are starting to see the story that was expected. So we had pretty much a month of increased volumes and high prices, or well, for titanium it was at the high end of the normal prices, 7 ISK for most of that month. But of course this was a rush on industry to still use the pre-changes BPCs and all of the requirements there, and once that was over, we kind of expected that demand for titanium especially would start to drop off. Not only is there less needed in the bigger ships, but on top of that, well, there's going to be a big bunch of reserves of product out there that has been manufactured, is maybe still being manufactured for some of the really big stuff at the moment, and thus demand was bound to drop. And we see this now, 1 year low point breaking straight through the 6 barrier without any hesitation, and we're talking at the moment in JITA 550, almost 545 for the sellers, 526 for the buyers. And unfortunately, right, if our read is correct that we do need a lot less titanium in the production of large ships, you can unfortunately expect that this could become the new normal, right? You could be happy with a price above 5 ISK, whereas before, 6.5 was like, okay, you could sell, you could hold. 7 ISK, definitely try to sell. So we could be looking at a lower average price for titanium that will become the new normal. And so that correction has clearly been engaged. We also see from the ticker that Megasite is down below 600 ISK, something that had been able to defend for quite a while. But this is normal, and unfortunately for titanium, I do expect it to be lasting. For the others, it may be there's maybe room for recovery. So pyrite is also showing that same downtrend, that same correction in the price. You get the very same pattern here, volumes for almost a month straight, very expensive prices, but right now nobody really needs pyrite for the current industry, especially when you've got your battleships, your carriers, and everything ready for sale for the upcoming weeks, maybe months. 22.55 for the sellers and 21.52 for the buyers. At least we're not back down to like the 10 ISK range, which we were at the start of all of these changes. So it's gonna be difficult to say though if pyrite is going to be able to, for instance, stay above 20 or not. But for now, we are in a situation where demand will be very low. So I'm also expecting a pullback in Mexalon at this point, and that's a very severe pullback. We basically already had to give back all of the gains from that volume increase over the last month, which brought the price, we gotta be honest here, to a 200 ISK price range, which is extremely expensive. For Mexalon. Normal average price, I would say at the start of the year we were in the right spot for Mexalon, historically speaking, around 75 ISK, and now we're trying to stay above 100. 107 for the sellers, 99 ISK for the buyers. That's a 50% correction in a matter of about a week. Very, very severe, of course. Your ISK per hour mining in the high ISK has down substantially. If you have to have a focus on that, I would say try to mine for Mexalon. That one still has a bit of a premium on its historical price. Titanium is bound to become the worst option. Pyrite is still doing okay at 20 ISK as well, but it still doesn't feel that great to me personally. Next up, we've got the isogen market that is also breaking down a little bit, staying above 40, or at least trying to do so. We're talking 46 ISK for the sellers and 43 for the buyers. But here, the biggest problem, in my opinion, is that we still have these volumes, and they're quite substantial. 100 million units here, 140 million units here, another 100. It's still, there's a lot of isogen that has been mined historically. We really don't need that much isogen in the economy at the moment, and so it's still really struggling to go anywhere, especially of course in this low demand environment that we're in right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what Noxium is actually doing. It's finally pulling back, but this one, you know, getting back to 1500. I mean, that is a quarter of the price, so that is a significant pullback. But even from the historical perspective, I'm going to say that this is still very expensive, and so this has shown that getting stuff in low sec is still something that's very difficult to do. And if you don't have the big reserves that are still existent for Isogen, well, that is reflected in the price. 1600 is almost for the sellers, 1461 for the buyers. Definitely a bit of a margin that opens up, but look at the difference in volumes. 1 million and 2 million, these are by far the biggest orders on the front page, and in the last 24 hours you get another one of 2 million and a million units, but you can clearly see that supply is in line for much higher prices than what's happening with Isogen at the moment. And I really doubt that there's someone out there that has easy access to mining 140 million units over just a couple of days or something like that, and bring those to the market easily. If we look at what's, you know, happening in the Noxium market. So the general lower demand is pulling all prices down, but Noxium is holding on quite well. So if you're looking for that more adventurous mining experience, Noxium should definitely be your focus. Then we've got Neurolinck with Zydrine, where we've got, well, a more organized space. I would say that, yeah, for mining, it's going to be easier to fully organize yourself and to get Zydrine on the market than it is in low sec with Noxium. And so as a result, we are seeing that pullback as well. Actually, that had started before the introduction of the changes. So here, you know, a bit of speculation that maybe a region in Neurolinck managed to create an enormous amount of this that already started to crash the price back down. It was, of course, a very profitable endeavor when Zydrine was at 2000 disk, but they may have spooked the market. And now, of course, we're in our low demand cycle, and so we have lost 50% of the value of Zydrine, going down from 2000 to 1000 disk on the chart. Sellers coming in at 980. Yeah, they're very aggressively selling still despite the crash on the price, and then 923 for the buyers. And I mean, this is pure speculation, I fully admit that. But I am going to say this. It's that well, this pattern does reek a little bit of automation, where you're just willing to dump the stuff no matter the cost. That also sort of entails that producing Zydrine for whoever is bringing this much Zydrine to the market all of a sudden really is no cost. And yeah, that to me kind of does reek of you know, botting, completely shooting itself in the foot from the perspective that, yeah, the price is just being crashed to ridiculous levels. But we do have to be careful, of course, on the impact that this has on the game. If you're starting to make something fully automated and completely free, its value goes basically to zero, and anyone that enjoys that activity gets punished in the process. So something you know, to I think keep a close eye on, exactly where all of that Zydrine is going. Definitely, in my opinion, if I were CCP, perhaps an exercise worth looking into. Then we've got the megasite market, that this feels a little bit more normal, was already not in a great spot because of how little of it we actually use at the moment, but we are also in that correction phase that's basically in line with the lower demand phase that we're in right now. And yeah, for the first time in quite a while, 5-day moving average wanting to go below the 600 mark, 597 for the sellers and 552 for the buyers. Here though, volumes, you know, again, struggling to get a couple million megasite together. From time to time it happens. For Neurolinck, I would say that that's kind of more normal, right? Because you have bigger, more organized groups that from time to time can organize like a big jump freighter or something like that in order to bring stuff in. For low sec, it's pretty obvious that that's a lot more difficult to fully organize. So that's what's happening there. And finally, we also have the morphite market that does not seem to struggle with lower demand or anything like that. It's able to very much maintain a price above 60,000 disk. In fact, it's almost 66,000 for the sellers and 61,400 for the buyers. So it's a down cycle for minerals. That is not unexpected. Yeah, the Zydrine Zydrine downfall starting this soon does feel a little bit strange. Now, there is one more possibility. That is, of course, that some entities or maybe some big speculators were ready for all of this, had big stocks of Zydrine out there, or not out there, but actually ready in JITA. And so when that bump up happened here to 2000 ISK, we just got a massive sell-off. Anyone and anything that had Zydrine starting to dump and crash the market, even before any of the others, of course, far before any of the others, had their downtrend. But still, I would say that investors would not be so eager to start dumping below 1000 ISK either. That's my take on that situation. Next up, the PI market coming in at 20 minutes. Right, nice and round timestamps so far. Let's get started here on the broadcast nodes. Actually, going back up a little bit, today's average is close to 2 million ISK. We're talking 1.9 million and above for the sellers and 1.65 million for the buyers. So there's definitely a big gap between sellers and buyers, but not that much supply. And at the moment, the broadcast node market seems to be dominated by the sellers. Very good news for the producers. And of course, if I'm not mistaken, you need some broadcast nodes in production of bigger ships at the moment as well. And so it's not just, well, we need to replace all the infrastructure that's being destroyed in the war, or there's more destruction in structures, which is bound to happen. You guys know that I've set up my first structure back in Iona in Galente space, and I already got my first blackmail, Eve mail to pay a ransom, which, my philosophy, no way. I've just ignored that type of stuff. But we will see. I'll keep you guys up to date on that as well. But there's definitely a far more active destructive cycle as well in structures now, with the cores that have made all of that more juicy, and so there's a bit more demand for all of that advanced PI material, not just coming from the structures, but also the changes that were done to industry. Construction blocks, though, these are still staying in a very low range at the moment, 8,500 for the sellers and 7,000 for the buyers. It is interesting that we still have a 1,500 margin on something that costs 8,500. That's still a percentage-wise very significant. So we do have, I think just less supply that's starting to affect that margin. Not the average prices are still terrible, so there's bound to still be just too much construction blocks out there, but the margin opening up is kind of interesting. Consumer electronics very flat at 7,500 ISK. So here we get a lot less margin, 7,700 for the sellers, 7,400 pretty much for the buyers. And yeah, it's not on that much supply. So unfortunately, the lack of demand is clearly still there as well. Then the coolants market has a bit more volatility now that fuel blocks are needed in industry as well. We saw that last week, a very big jump up in fuel block prices. That's kind of recovering, but as a result, at least we're away from 5,000 ISK from coolants, the bottom price, and we're back at 8,200 for the sellers, 7,500 for the buyers. It's still not a great price, but I'll be honest, I'm producing coolants, and here I could sell like maybe a percentage of that above 8,000 ISK. It's like a 20% off of what I'm used to. It's not that bad. Then we've got cryoprotectant solutions, very flat at 100,000 ISK. Buyers coming in at 92,000. I'm not going to repeat that story every single time, but if you see this pattern with a big jump or high price at the start, and then in October, or sometimes I think a little bit later, this bump here is not always exactly at the same spot. We're talking a good that's tied to implants, and that's where the speculative investors probably are trying to still buy as low as possible, which, well, at the moment you can buy at like 92,000. That is definitely a pretty low price. As always, I would recommend very slowly trying to grab the lowest points. Don't put like billions of ISK into cryoprotectant solutions, hoping, expecting that CCP will come out with an implant set and then getting massive amounts of profits on a single trade. That's not how I would do things, but yeah, this is clearly at the moment very much stuck on that low 100,000 ISK mark. If CCP would come out with an announcement for an implant set or something like that, would be data mined on CC or something like that, you would be looking at very happy customers that would be holding on to cryoprotectant solutions that they bought well below 100k. Enriched uranium, also a bit of a comeback, still not a great price though. 9,000 is though for the sellers, around 8,000 for the buyers, so that margin starts to open up, and 9,000, it's not great. I mean, enriched uranium, pretty difficult to make compared to coolants, for instance, so you would expect a premium, but it's there, right? Coolants 8,200, enriched uranium almost 9,000 ISK. This starts to be the place where I would say, you know what, maybe selling is not that bad anymore. It's still bad, but it's not terrible. Integrity response drones, and I actually have to drink here for a second before I lose my voice. So the integrity response drones, a very weird data point here at 5 million ISK. Sellers coming back in very quickly, so I'm gonna read this. Is there a volume spike? Well, it's not even that much, but kind of looks like someone bought the market clean and basically bought every single integrity response drones below 5 million ISK, and that then there was even a single transaction just below that. Now supply is starting to come in, has pushed the price back down to 2.5 million, 1.9 for the buyers. But this is very interesting. I'm again going to say that if you look at industry, that this is going to now start to be needed in capital stuff as well, and so as a result, from time to time it's definitely possible that we'll see some of these big buys from some Neurolinck entities that basically feel forced to, if they want to keep their capital and super capital production up and running. So integrity response drones 2.5 million ISK, that's definitely a very good price at the moment due to a lack of supply and a big buyout, a big rush on anything that was available on the market. Mechanical parts next, very easy to produce as well. 7.6 for the sellers, 7.4 for the buyers. That to me would still be like, no, that's terrible. If we could get above 8,000, maybe there you could sell some mechanical parts. This still feels like too much of a loss. Then we got nanites tied to implants, of course, making its way back above 5k. 5.4 for the sellers, 4.7 for the buyers. Slight volume increase on, well, close to a 1-year low point, and I do think that this is exactly what's happening. You do have some investors that are keeping an eye on these items, and so you can see here when we go below 5k, volumes go up, and not too much, but just enough to grab the cheapest stuff so that you are ready. Nano factories, also a big buyout apparently happening with today's average well above 1.1 million, but supply coming in and still here. Okay, maybe not exactly sure if there was a big buyout. Why the hell would there be an average price well above 1.1? But right, it's almost a million for the sellers, almost 800,000 ISK for the buyers. A decent price. There's definitely some volume anomalies that are happening though in some of these advanced PI materials. Organic mortar applicators, same thing, right? Look at this data point here, not even on volume, so it's kind of a weird one. 900,000 for the sellers, 820 for the buyers. Feels like it actually should just stay in line with being, you know, decently good price, a decently good price. Then we get recursive computing modules, definitely a big volume spike. Let's see what these are selling for. 1.3 million, and first buyer well above a million as well. But look at the availability. This does start to be a little bit of a problem, so I would not be surprised that this is starting to be like a product that will have more volatility, a lot of these advanced PI materials, due to imports bouts in Neurolinck, where they basically come here to JITA and say, on this trip, yeah, we want advanced PI materials for our carriers, bring them in bulk, and that could be an opportunity for PI producers, of course, to try and gear themselves a little bit more towards that high-end stuff. Because when it comes to fuels, like here robotics, we're still in a very bad spot. 65,000 for the sellers, 57,000 for the buyers. That is, you know, very cheap. 100k normal price for robotics, so 80,000. That's where it starts to be less bad, I would say. Self-harmonizing power cores. This one had done basically a full recovery and is still there. 1.9 million for the sellers, almost 1.7 for the buyers. Definitely a very good price as well. Sterile Conduits, yeah, data points all over the place here again, definitely recovering, and not that much available on the market at 1.2 million, almost a bit above 900,000 for the buyers. Yukomi superconductors, again, implant stuff well below 75k, but I would love to see, well, there's not that many buyers in JITA. You're now trying to buy this below 60,000 disc. Yeah, that would be a buy order to try to compete with and hope that you can grab some of them. So you will have to be careful with the volumes here, but I think if you can buy Yukomi superconductors close to 60k or below that, you are looking at something that's good to hold if an implant set comes out. And then finally, the wetware mainframes that are counter to the trend, pulling back just a little bit. There's still 185 million for the sellers and 155 million for the buyers. Definitely still very nice, I would say, recovered. Maybe not 100%, but definitely well away from those bottom prices about half a year ago. Advanced Moon Materials next, coming in at 30.20. Let's see what's happening in the carbide market first. Crystalline carbonate for Galente coming back down. So I think here what we'll be seeing is that there may be a little bit of that suffering from low demand, from a little bit less of production needs happening even in Tech 2, or maybe the market has basically finally tried to absorb the changes to the Marauders that have basically required fresh supplies, more supplies to come online in a more steady way. But for crystalline carbonate, after a month of very high prices, we went well above 200 disc. We're back in 150 for the sellers, 144 for the buyers, and back on the normal average range for this product. So that's interesting. Now the Caldari one may be a different story. So let's take a look at that, which is titanium carbide. Definitely seeing that volatility and a pullback to 250, but comparing this to the 1-year chart, this is still very volatile and very expensive. 250 is for the sellers, 235 for the buyers. So here we still have a massive premium of almost 100 disc compared to the average price on titanium carbide. We're not really willing to go to the 350s anymore, so that's a very nice double peak at 1-year high points, over double the average price, you could say. That doesn't last, but 250 seems to be defendable for titanium carbide. Then we've got our Minmatar version, which is Fernite carbide at 3.1, 175. All right, able to also maintain a bit of a premium. It's coming under pressure right here, 167 for the sellers and 144 for the buyers. But yeah, below 150 was definitely a more normal situation. So yeah, Galente seems to actually be the exception so far with its full pullback. Both Minmatar and Caldari carbides are still going for a premium. And then finally we've got tungsten carbide for Amar that, well, it's below 200 all of a sudden, 186 for the sellers and 182 for the buyers. I would still call it a bit of a premium, right? 175-ish, but not that much anymore either. And also double peaks up to 300 disc here for tungsten carbide. So that's the real question. Is Galente early, and can we expect more of a pullback on the others, or are the others actually the ones that are showing that no, this premium may be here to stay? And so could this be a bit of an over reaction, and could we see an increase in price back to maybe 175, 180 or something like that for crystalline carbonate? I would say make your bets, and that's a real question. I think both are potentially possible because, well, Tech 2 not really that impacted by the industry changes, and the Marauders are still incredible ships. Demand for those must still be very, very high. And thus that should be absorbing a lot more of these materials, requiring a lot of it to come online. Has that happened already? Kinda doubt it myself. For the meta materials, we are talking photonic for Galente. That, well, is okay. Still, I would say slightly below average, a bit of volatility there, but nothing too special. 13,400 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. Yeah, okay price. I would even call it slightly below average. Then we've got non-linear metamaterials for Caldari. That's also basically normalizing, right? 20 to 25,000 normal range. We're right back there. 22,000 for the sellers, 21 for the buyers. Could even say that this is close to the same thing. Slightly below average for this non-linear metamaterials market. Then we've got the Minmetar, which is plasmonic metamaterials. Same thing, right? Well below 20k, pretty stable at the moment. 18,000 for the sellers, 17,000 almost for the buyers. This one, I'd call it a regular price. Maybe even again, if we look at where we started off here, this first part, slightly below average, but feels kind of normal and stable. And finally, terahertz metamaterials for Amar. Exactly the same story here. First part of the year, well above 17.5, 20k on average. Then we had this downtrend, right? This constant pressure that was very clearly visible for the Amar market. And then a spike here that happened, but was pretty easily digested, and overall we never saw a massive sell opportunity or a maintained plateau high price or anything like that. 17,400 for the sellers and 16,400 for the buyers. I'd call that again average to just a little bit below average. So I'm kind of surprised that, you know, these metamaterials not really reacting that much to anything that's been happening. Then we still have some others where, well, unfortunately, this was going to be my read on this. I actually expected it last week, but a lot of these had made a little bit of a comeback, but I saw no real reason for that to be maintained. And so here is fermionic condensates that, yeah, just kind of broke, went well below 70k all of a sudden. 66,600 for the sellers. 55,000 for the buyers. Big margin opening up here. Demand not keeping up. Then ferrogel well below 35,000, trying to eke back a little bit, but yeah, that's still a very cheap price as well. Fullerite, right, was able to defend 1,000 disc up until last week, and then nope, the pressure was there. The signs were there, right? We did see that pressure, and so now we're down to 900 disc for the sellers and well below that for the buyers. Hypersynaptic fibers were still very low, making their way back to 10,000 ISK, but look at what happens very quickly, right? We make our way back 10,000 ISK, and then 9,900 comes into view right away on just a couple of sellers. 9,500 for the buyer. So expect this to, you know, make a bit of a stop here very quickly. I doubt we'll break 10k. Then we get nanotransistors also making its way back above 5,000 ISK. There are, you know, some counter moves here, but here is the problem. The response from supply is very quick. We're back down below 5,000 ISK for the sellers. 4,940 for the buyers. So from time to time you're seeing more demand, but it's being supplied very quickly basically. Phenolic composites, that one is able to get back to a normal 2,000 ISK price range, but again sellers coming in below 2,000 right off the bat, and then we're talking 1,800 for the buyers. I don't think that any of these recoveries that we're seeing here will last for very long. And then ceramic fibers was an exception that had made gains with the announcement. I think it's basically needed a lot. In the new industry situation, but even that one, right, went above 500 ISK and was able to stay there for a couple of months. It's basically now at 470 for the sellers, 430 for the buyers. Probably just, you know, less industry needs at the moment because of everything that was produced during these couple of months. Or this is the announcement right here in March, and then in April. No, announcement was here somewhere. All right, so I'm not sure how you get this move up here, but it's become more expensive, and right now, for the first time in a couple months, we're back below that 500 ISK range. So, yeah, advanced boom mats, definitely a mixed picture. Seeing some pressure here and there. Not sure if I would make a lot of gambles on this one right now. I'd rather gamble in Tech 2s, honestly. So let's see what's happening there. 38.30. Like that. As always, we'll start with a couple of Caldari ones that, well, Caldari still had that premium on its carbide material, and so Basilisk building on its high point to an even bigger price jump to above 280. Finally, some supply coming in, right? Last 24 hours driving the price back down to 274, 261 for the buyers though, so very narrow margin for a 1-year high point price range, you could say, and a couple trades happening in the last week or so, well above 280. So very, very expensive Caldari Tech 2 ship right here. Cerberus going for almost 300 million ISK, definitely in that same high price ballpark. 298 for the sellers, 271 for the buyers. Buyers forced up like crazy right here. So that's clearly starting to become a little bit more structural, and then we'll see if there's that difference, because we saw that the Caldari carbide going for that massive premium, but the Galente one fully recovering, and then Minmatar and Amar still a little bit expensive, but not as big a margin as what we saw in Caldari. So here's the Guardian, for instance. Well, it does translate here so far. Guardian still above 230 million ISK, 228 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. Now it's also a logistics cruiser, so it's not going for a 280 range like for the Basilisk, but it's definitely away from those cheap prices that we saw when the carbides were also suffering from all of that pressure in that segment. And so it's a recovery. Amar's been a little bit more stable. That's clearly shown here as well. Then we've got the Hound. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a trade to make. Clearly, all of these stealth bombers were lagging behind on the increased prices that we saw in all of these cruisers. So we had an expected jump up to well above 30 million. And supply, this is the one thing why I personally really like these stealth bombers and smaller frigates for trading, because you do have the ability to respond more quickly, since you need a lot less material to bring a couple hundred stealth hounds to the market. And that's exactly what happened here, right? Supply came in very hard when we went above 30 million ISK. Currently we're down to 28 million. 26 million for the buyers. Look at these volumes, that feels like a lot, so we'll have to keep a close eye on that in the upcoming weeks. If volumes can maintain, then we could crash the price back down with buy orders well below 25 million, and so that volatility cycle, it could be starting here. This does feel like a little bit too much even at this price, but perhaps demand is strong enough. We'll see. Then we've got the Iquitursa to keep an eye on. The Triglavian story, that is, well, very, very expensive still. 870 million for the sellers, 800 million for the buyers. Basically a complete lack of supply. The Ishtar for the Galente, still going at a premium, I would say. Almost 250 for the sellers and 235 million for the buyers. So despite the basically full recovery from its carbide material, we're still seeing that premium here. We're seeing basically that premium in all of these Tech 2 cruisers. So I would say that, yeah, it feels like that one may have overshot a little bit. To me, all of what I'm seeing so far means that this is probably a little bit too low in the grand scheme of things. That's my read on that. Then we've got the Manticore Stealth Bomber Double Spike. What are we talking? 45 million? No, all right. So that was basically maybe an anomalous trade or something like that happened up here, but clearly still very expensive. Well, Caldari and Stealth Bomber, 38 million for the sellers, almost 30 million for the buyers. And yeah, a month ago here, when I was calling that, you could look what happened here with the Basilisk, you could look what happened here with the Cerberus, and then the Manticore was clearly lagging behind. You could have bought these for 25 million. And now, well, looking at these supplies, it's coming online, but it's just not enough. That is a very nice profit to take if you followed that advice. It was kind of predictable, honestly. But then the question is going to be, this is now bound to be, right, compare that to the Hound, and then we'll take a look at the others, of course, in a moment. But this is bound to be the most profitable stealth bomber. It's still just a frigate, so the amounts needed to produce a lot of these should be doable for some of the more organized players and corporations out there. So will they overproduce this, and will we start to see that potential speculative cycle starting? That's what I'm curious about. Then we get the Munin for Minmatar, definitely still building on its premium as well. 260 million for the sellers, 240 for the buyers, basically on a lack of supply. Here is the Nemesis, shot up to 30 million ISK, is already recovering just like the Hound, 29 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. Bit more supply, this doesn't feel that outlandish, right? The Hound has me a little bit worried if you're looking for high prices. Nemesis, that feels like it could stabilize at a higher range, but compared to the Manticore, obviously a lot less expensive. Then we've got the Oniros Galente logistics cruiser, still at a premium as well. Again, to me, indicating that the Carbide is a little bit underpriced at the moment. 210 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. High end of the trade range. For the battleships, the Panther not showing any signs of release just yet. 1.4 billion for the sellers, almost 1.3 billion for the first buyer. They have to go up, it's all just more expensive. And then here is the Purifier, that's able to still maintain a premium above 30 at 32 million, 27 million for the buyers, and supply wise not that much. So at the moment there's going to be this big rush on the Manticore, and then the Purifier is still very expensive at the moment. We will see. I'm curious to see how low the Hound can go and if they can push through to buyers below 25 million. That could already create another buy opportunity if that happens. Very interesting to see these stealth bomber markets show signs of volatility and a lot of speculative building, supplying, not supplying. Very cool. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Then we've got the Scimitar logistics for Minmatar. Still, again, that premium on the average price, but nothing too crazy. 235 for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. Then the Widow Caldari battleship. 1.4 billion for the sellers, above 1.2 billion for the buyers, showing the premium cost at the moment. And finally we get the Zealot, that's continuing a slow climb back as well. 240 almost for the sellers, 200 million for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up here, definitely not the most popular ship, but there was another heavy assault cruiser. And so yeah, that recovery due to the increased costs in price for Tech 2 ships is there. And again, my read on the current market is that if you're looking for speculative potential, look for the small ones where an overreaction from industry is still possible, or more likely than, for instance, in a cruiser battleships, where it would take that much product that's going for that extra price at the moment to make that happen. In the frigates, it can still happen, which we're seeing right now, when with the Hound going back down with quite a bit of supply, while the Manticore is basically at a one-year high point at the moment, and is probably bound to draw in a lot of supply at the moment as well. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that evolves. Next up, the Tech 3 ships at 46.45. A quick drink again though. Whoop. Like that. As always, we'll start with the destroyers that last week, to me it felt like they were gonna, stabilize just below 50 million. Is Confessor though on slightly higher volumes over the last week, pushing back up above 54 million for the sellers, 46 million for the buyers. Supply wise, nothing too crazy, a little bit of supply here, pushing at 55 million for just a couple of days. Kind of weird sell orders, but all right. So right now here the Confessor could require a bit more supply if everything else goes back down to the 50 million range, which for the Hecate it does. 49 for the first seller, 46 million for the buyers, 73 of them should help stabilize things. So this one is in line with expectation. New supplies here, this same person again that's dumping like maybe 100 or so of these destroyers in a rather weird way. Then we got the Jackdaw. Okay, so that one went down. Did we see that last week? I'm not sure, but was definitely at a lower price. And then buyers came in, pushing us back to 50 million, 49.5. Supplies coming in, including a couple that are just a week. But I think there's basically enough in those last 24 hours as well to keep us in this range. 44 million for the buyers. So honestly, I think this Confessor opportunity will not last very long. There's bound to be enough potential supply here to bring us back down. Everyone else is already at that 49 million range, which we were expecting. And then the Zwepel, the least popular one, 46 million for the sellers, 42 for the buyers. Supply wise, normal for the least popular one. Yeah, I'm not spotting anything completely outlandish. Maybe a little bit of a surprise volume increase here in the confessor that has pushed us up above 50 million ISK, but I think the market will respond quite quickly to that, and so maybe you can see that as a little bit of a sell opportunity, but really the move was this, so from 47 to 54. I don't think there's that big of a trade in it. Honestly, it's all very much pretty stable, I would say, in the tactical destroyer market, where we're not seeing that big of volume spikes that are completely disrupting the market. You know, pretty much whatever happens tends to be absorbed pretty easily and quickly. Yeah, there's no big mistakes either with massive oversupplies that crash a price down, where you're saying, all right, invest, because that seems to be a little bit over the top with the supply there. So it's quite stable. Next up, we've got the cruiser market with the Legion staying above 180, 188 for the sellers, 171 for the buyers, basically losing the volatility of the last couple of months and stabilizing at a little bit of an above average price, 180 though for a strategic cruiser, not completely out of line either, especially if we look at everything else going up in price. Then we've got the Loki showing volatility, went up to 250, already back down to 200 million, 195 in fact for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. For the most popular strategic cruiser, I'd say that this is also actually a normal price at the moment. A bit of a speculative jump here, but I'm gonna say that same thing again. To sell here with a single Loki, probably possible. Once you start to invest in more of them, feels very, very risky in this cruiser market. Then we've got the Proteus also landing on 180, 176 in fact for the sellers, 159 for the buyers. Again, the least popular strategic cruiser going a little bit below 180. I'd say that that's a normal price as well. And then the Tengu is actually a pretty good all-around platform, so 188 for the sellers, 172 for the buyers. Has that probably that PVE premium that's still playing here. So none of these to me are buys at the moment. A sell opportunity, yeah, you have to be really on the ball to to be able to spot these opportunities, like here with the Loki about what would that be, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. That was your sell opportunity, but they really don't last very long in this cruiser market. Far more of a gamble situation in my opinion than the destroyer market. And so again, that same tip, if you do spot a very cheap strategic cruiser, you can buy it, but I would never, have need of selling more than one at any given time if I'm looking to take profits. And then finally, for the extra product, we got a little bit of a request at 52 minutes, let's say. And that's to take a quick look already at the trigger Neurolinks, I think it was. So let's see if I can find it. Try to write it down, but yeah, CCP and their names, so it's not like that. All right, let's see if I can go for trigger, something like that. So we have Blueprint Reactions, Neurolinck, Manufacturing and Research. We have GeoRD, SR, and UC. I think those were the ones that were requested. So let's take a quick look at that. This is definitely a new product required after the industry changes, and these are still very expensive, but going down pretty quickly, right? Average price at the introduction above 40 million ISK, and here at the tail end we are starting to see the pullback, and someone has managed to bring 94 of them and is selling them for 22 million. Buyers are staying well below 10 million ISK. So this is what's at the moment causing a lot of volatility, because if you're, and it's probably a lot of players out there not following everything all that closely, you may be looking at just the industry window to get a bit of an idea of cost and thus potential price for the end product. But of course, with the introduction of all of these new items, there's not really a market, not really a consensus price just yet, and a lot of these are bound to be super expensive. So if you follow the average price that the game is going to give you now, which is probably like 45 million for a single trigger Neurolinck conduit, then yeah, your ship becomes extremely expensive. But of course, now first sellers coming in at 22 million, I do expect everything to for those new products to become far more reasonable than what it is now. The RD trigger Neurolinck also 45 million to 40 million for most of the beginning data, and is pushing back down on supply down to 30 million ISK. Buyers, very careful buyers here, not willing to pay more than 3 million ISK. Then we've got the SR trigger, also again 45 million seem to be the introduction consensus, but look at that. People coming in with a decent amount of volumes at 20 million already, buyers up to 6 million, but well below the 10 million mark. And then finally the UC trigger unit, same pattern again, 40 to 45 million in the first couple of days, and now supply is coming in at 25 million. Don't ask me to speculate on where this is going to land. I really don't know, but this is a typical pattern for new stuff in New Eden, right? To be the first, it gives you a bit of an opportunity to sell at crazy prices in the beginning. There's always impatience in the market, in the player base, that creates that opportunity, but it never lasts very long. Inevitably, the supply lines come online, the opportunity is spotted, and supplies bring us down. The market forces supply and demand to create the price that is considered or can be considered a decently correct price. It's very difficult to manipulate something like that for extended periods of time, or to monopolize any of this stuff. And as a result, we are seeing that crashing of the price, having, you could say, of the price in pretty short order for these Neurolinck, trigger Neurolinck conduits. So it's of course a very interesting thing to see happen yet again, and now to see it happen in this many products, right? Because CCP has increased the complexity of that higher end, you could say, industry, but overall, the market does function in EVE Online. It's a very big market. Lots of players are being active in here. And so even now at 20 million and 25 million, I still think that they're making a lot of ISK for their efforts, and that we'll see, in all likeliness, even lower consensus prices later down the line. And that is it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, I'll see you next time.